and we'll start with some Auckland Blues Super Rugby thoughts and ideas. It was an interesting one. We are both Blues fans, so we're feeling like we might touch on the Blues over the next few weeks as Super Rugby Aotearoa does roll on. But it was a weird little dynamic wildcard because I was watching that Blues game and I had, both of us, when we're watching these games, like obviously we're born and raised in Aotearoa, so we are partial to a bit of rugby, but we don't cover rugby. But watching the game, you do have insights that I think a lot of other people might not have, and that gets you excited to talk about it. So I had that feeling. I was Sunday afternoon footy. That's a fantastic thing that we'll touch on as well. Watching the Blues, watching jam-packed Eden Park, good vibes, good footy. Insights are flowing through my mind about different players and all sorts of good stuff happening in my brain. Get a bit of hype, get a bit of fizz going in my loins, thinking about rugby, and then pop on Monday morning and all the mainstream media like the whole first half of the bloody sports pages, all rugby, and that just reminded me of our purpose with the niche case. So yeah, it is about expressing our views a little bit, and we won't write about rugby other than a couple of minutes on the podcast where you might find no rugby with the niche case, and that's because it's just completely saturated in Aotearoa, and the excitement after watching that Blues game, they defeated the Hurricanes, quickly evaporated when you just look at the mainstream media and just how much, once again, it just seems like a lot of it is bullshit. It's just wall-to-wall coverage of rugby. So that, if anything, to get us started here, Wildcard, it reminded me of my purpose in covering Kiwi sport, that our primary focus is to celebrate Aotearoa as a sporting nation, all different sports. We are the greatest sporting nation in the world. We are the greatest creative nation in the world, KG for KG. And our purpose here for the niche case is to showcase that, and showcase that Aotearoa is not just a rugby nation. Aotearoa is a fantastic sporting nation all round, and we don't put rugby on the pedestal within Aotearoa that the mainstream media does. So definitely going to touch on some Blues stuff here and offer a few deep cuts. But yeah, more than anything, it just reminded me of our purpose here at the Niche Case, and seeing the saturation of rugby coverage, which absolutely made me yawn.
Yeah, it's just a little. Well, hey, let's not pull any punches here. There's a lot of bootlicking involved when it comes to these kind of things. Like, it just sort of seems like fawning to the wider, not even to the wider public. It's just like fawning to what people think people are supposed to be like in New Zealand. Like, you got to be a big old rugby fan, and that's why I sort of watch when I do watch rugby, and I don't watch a lot. It's probably the first. I watched both those games on the weekend. Probably the first two I've watched all of 2020. All Blacks haven't been on this year or anything like that, so it's been a little bit of a clean slate. But ordinarily, Super Rugby not particularly enticing to myself. Having said that, bloody enjoyed both those games. All the excellent spectacles. Getting the crowds in was just the most incredible thing after everything that's been gone through. And I think you can probably add the old. Along with being the best sporting creative nation on the planet per capita, whatever, like, we're probably also the best pandemic response nation on the planet. So chuck that one on the old certificate as well. So the whole spectacle of it was what caught me. I didn't really, I generally, because I take a little bit of a step back when it comes to watching rugby, I tend to also watch it from that step back, and then I can get a little bit cynical about things like Justin Marshall yelling out just borderline like Forrest Gump without the heart type level statements. Like, what are you even talking about? Is that even making... He said something, I can't remember what it was, but there was something he said about like microsecond. That was it. He was talking about the microseconds during a game, and I'm like, seconds are seconds. Like it's a measurement of time. You can't have a different measurement of the measurement. You can't have like 1 centimeter is smaller than this other centimeter. Like that's not actually physically possible. There's a little bit of a weirdo. I don't know where he got his physics degree, but Facebook University probably. And like that can sometimes cloud the way I also watch the games, as I don't. Another reason why I probably don't watch them that much is because I don't particularly. It's not that much fun watching and just being cynical about things. But like there was not a lot to be cynical about watching. Like just 2 really entertaining, high quality games. Few too many penalties in the old ruck with the what do you call them? The rule changey majiggy thingies. Don't know why both NRL and Super Rugby felt the need to go weird with game-changing things, but at the same time, you could also say like it affected the flow of the game in a positive way in other aspects. So like just good entertaining rugby. I'm surprised to be able to say that in the year of 2020, but I guess everything else has gone wonky this year, so that might as well.
And watching the Blues and the main takeaway was that there was a lot of Beauden Barrett. Not necessarily, and this is where it gets really interesting, in thinking about the Blues specifically, because when I watched the Blues and on the Sunday afternoon, I saw all my insights came from players who weren't Beauden Barrett, but all the attention was on Beauden Barrett, and all I saw Beauden Barrett do, which is kind of good, like it's a good classy touch, was when the Blues are kicking for touch, Beauden Barrett would kick for touch with a tempo, so he would quickly kick for touch instead of the Blues taking 2 minutes to suss out their plan and suss out their strategies and their next couple of plays that they were going to roll out. Beauden Barrett, being like from his history with the All Blacks are pretty damn good at this and raising the tempo, pushing the tempo. Beauden Barrett would take the kicks for touch very quickly, get the Blues moving. Obviously, that impacts the fatigue that the opposition's under, especially when the Blues are stealing multiple lineouts from their opponents. So they're stealing possession away. When they get a penalty, they're playing quickly, kick for touch, get up there to get the line out done. Whereas the Wellington Firebirds were a bit slower, but generally just less cohesive. But I say all that to say that that's literally what I saw Beauden Barrett do. He didn't have a real, maybe some goal kicking, but he didn't goal kick. It was Terry Black. So I just struggled to see like now that's not obviously Beauden Barrett's world class, and Beauden Barrett, this was his first game back for the Blues and all of that stuff. So I wasn't expecting a swashbuckling display from Beauden Barrett necessarily, but to me it shows the insights and education that comes like from the rugby coverage, because I don't necessarily, and this is where I get excited because I think I can and we can add to the conversation around rugby, in the sense that all the attention's on Beauden Barrett, everyone's focusing on Beauden Barrett, where there's less attention onto how the Blues were actually winning the game. All Beauden Barrett did was some classy touches in kicking for touch, but then I look at like what the Hoskins Satutu dude was doing in the Blues forward pack. I look at TJ Faiani, who is consistently solid. Like anytime I watch the Auckland team play, or anytime I do watch the Blues play, TJ Faiani is just consistently 7 out of 10. But then you get these extra classy touches. He put a grubber in for the left winger for the Blues, can't remember off the top of my head, but he like carried the ball all the way into the line, and as he was getting tackled, he puts the grubber in. That is the class that you would usually associate with the Beauden Barrett type. But TJ Faiani's just, rolling it out in the midfield, and I think someone like TJ Faiani, and to a lesser extent Hoskins Satutu, like Satutu gets a lot of recognition. Like, he was doing some great work around the ruck, and just his mobile, his skill. He's a massive unit as well. But there's players in that Blues team like a TJ Whaiani, or like a Ofatonga Fasi, or even Goodhue, old mate Goodhue coming in at lock as well. There's players in that Blues team who are key players, crucial players who are just steady and had far greater impacts on that game than Beauden Barrett.
Yeah, Caleb Clark was a left winger, for the Blues. I'm pretty sure was son of All Black Ronnie Clark.
Yeah, Caleb Clark. So on the other side, you do have Talea, and then left wing Caleb Clark, son of Ronnie Clark. And they said the Hoskins Satutu is the son of Waisaki Satutu, who used to play as well.
Yeah, there you go. It's always been one of those things that, how people, you were saying about the Warriors copping it for, like, supposedly having the pick of players from around New Zealand, which is not really a fact whatsoever. Whereas the Blues, that's probably something that's been more accurately thrown at them over recent years, particularly when they're struggling. I mean, it's harsh, because it's like, if you got so many players to pick from, you can't pick all of them, right? You gotta like select some, and if those players that you do select aren't coming through to the highest level, and the ones that you miss are, well, then perhaps maybe it's not your scouting that's the issue, maybe it's your coaching and your pathways and stuff like that. Like, there's, in the very least, it could be. So it's one of them little balancing acts. And one of the criticisms that's probably been fairly thrown, I would suggest, at Auckland Rugby is that it favours its own a little bit too much. It, like, picks out of the same major clubs. I think Auckland Cricket's probably had this, certainly from speaking to people involved outside of the main couple central clubs there. Like, Auckland Cricket's had similar things, and it's a tricky one to balance, because it's like, is there a little bit of nepotism or favoritism involved? Perhaps, but at the same time, like, it's that same thing, you can't pick everyone, so the ones you just gotta like trust yourself that the players you bring through, regardless of the pathways or whatever, are gonna be the right ones, or gonna at least be successful, whether right or wrong. There's no right or wrong. It's everything comes down to application and all those other various things. Like, you just got to trust that you can bring the best out in players, and if you don't do that, then you open yourself up to criticism, and if you do, then you don't. If you do, then you don't, Like, that's getting good results out of, and also, like, I mean, you got to also chuck in the Beauden Barrett signing from a similar perspective, because that is a big name signing. It is like a lot of pressure on his shoulders. So even if he didn't do a whole lot in that game, and I don't think he did, like, I thought Ochere Black was really the focal point for them in a good way too. Like, it's kind of what you want. If one guy's taking the attention, you need the other people to succeed in the space that they allow you there for. And, like, Beauden Barrett just being a classy All Black is probably, but also, like, not pulling all the strings, probably the best thing for that team. Like, it loosens up the pressure on other players, but it also allows them the freedom to do what they do best. That seems just like a all-round positive thing to me.
I would throw up a general idea, especially moving forward, how Beauden Barrett is portrayed and covered versus how Ardie Savea is portrayed and covered. Because I do think there are some differences there. Like, Beauden Barrett is your quintessential Pākehā All Black. Everyone loves him. Darling of the media, darling of the Women's Day and the Women's Weekly. Very good at rugby. Everything is what Pākehā Aotearoa loves. All the white people in New Zealand, they just love a Beauden Barrett coming up on their screens. And then Ardie Savea, obviously there's a racial implication here, that's what I'm alluding to. He is someone who, and I will come back to Super Rugby, because I do want to know, like, which player for you is like a standout with the Blues, so to keep that in mind, and we'll come back to that. It is a very interesting situation, because you look at Beauden Barrett, very prim proper by the book, Pākehā All Black and all those things fit into the ideals, especially of the mainstream media, beautifully. But then you look at Ari Savia, and obviously he's a Samoan. That is part of this, but it's not all of it, because Ari Savia is someone who is taking his own power into his own hands. He's got his podcast, he's got a little clothing label. He is leading the way in a lot of topics that are far more important than the stuff Bowden Barrett's reporting on. Whether it's social media influencers or just, those kind of things. Ari Savia is speaking and leading matters that are important to the well-being of young Kiwis. And that's through his podcast and interviewing different people, and just how he's taken control of his platform and his voice. To me, it's far more admirable, and I'm a Pākehā Kiwi. I draw far more inspiration and leadership from Ari Savia than I do Bowden Barrett. And then you have maybe a couple months ago, Ari Savia went on the Ice Project with Isaac John, who is the guy who founded YKTR, played in the NRL, played for the Warriors, and Ari Savia kind of just, off the cuff, just saying, yeah, I'd love to play NRL, it looks cool, and, blah, blah, blah. And then the situation blows up back in New Zealand because, heaven forbid, Ari Savia wants to go play in the NRL. And that took it to another level. So I do want to throw up that situation moving forward. Just be aware of how Bowden Barrett is portrayed by the mainstream media, given all the factors that go into who he is and what he represents in Aotearoa, and then pay attention to, side note, I'd strongly suggest you pay attention to what Ari Savia is doing, because he is a fantastic leader for young Kiwis, but then pay attention to how Ari Savia is portrayed. And it's a sub-layer of funk there, is you've got two different people who, one is very corporate, one is very by the book, and then you've got another one who is pouncing on all the opportunities that are available in 2020 through social media, through podcasts and YouTube, and the platform he does have, expressing his opinions using that platform, which in a way goes directly against the mainstream media. So I think that is a fascinating back show to what we have. So Wildcard, you can either bounce off that, or you can just get into who stood up for you in that Blues team.
I'll give you a bit of both. I mean, the thing, this, it's not a criticism of Bowden Barrett either, like what you're saying, which is 110% true. It's just jarringly obvious those things exist. And maybe if you're a bit too close, you don't see those and you come up with excuses or whatever. The point, though, I mean, not the point, the reason for that is because, Bowden Barrett's just being who Bowden Barrett is. If he doesn't want to speak up or have, interests beyond rugby, that's fine. That's his own, choices. It's just the platform and the prominence given to him, as opposed to someone else who is a more critical thinker, a challenging speaker as well, and just generally a better speaker. To be honest, Ari Savia hosts a podcast for a reason, because he can hold a conversation, whereas a lot Bowden Barrett's just your typical kind of that I don't even need to go beyond typical. The typical sums it up right there. He'll have a laugh. He won't take himself too seriously. He'll play well when he's on the field, sort of thing. And all of that adds up to a figure who is very non-threatening to your general sort of Kiwi boomers, right? And that's pretty much why those people have a big say in the rugby media, but just in the rugby community in general, going far beyond media reaches, in a way which maybe other sports aren't as sort of tethered to that old school kind of thinking. And Bowden Barrett has a tidy haircut, and he's there's nothing fussy going on about him. He's nice and blah blah. Well, bloody nice and white would probably be a way which people wouldn't admit to, but that's kind of what they're thinking when they talk about him in that kind of way. So, it is a very obvious kind of comparison, and perhaps I don't know if I'm digging a little bit too deep here and trying to pick at scabs or whatever, but you could almost like I think it goes beyond media representation as well. I think Ardie Savea for a long time had to work harder to earn his spot as a starting All Blacks player, even to where now, like, I mean, if you could even say that he should have been in the I would have had him in the conversation as a potential All Blacks captain. I'm not criticizing Sam Cane because I think he also did the apprenticeship and very much was like the next guy in line, which is the way it has been done. Like Kieran Reid was very obviously going to be the guy to take over from Richie McCaw as well. But they play in similar positions, Ardie Savea and Sam Cane, and you could argue Ardie Savea was like borderline the best All Black last year. I mean, if that's the case, then suddenly Sam Cane is the captain, perhaps not even the best player in his own position. That also, like, that in itself, like, that sort of thought, and this other thought we're talking about, comparing, like, the way he's portrayed, individually, those two things are their own things, but when you put them together, like, when you apply the fact that both those kind of situations have arisen, perhaps there's a little, like, it's just a little more evidence to chuck in the old case file. You might also want to counter-respond to that, but I will say, on your question of players that stood out, it's very hard to go past, old mate from, Kerry, Tom Robinson. Big, like, stands out in a number of ways. I thought he was, like, just a player who's really enjoyable to watch because he's all energy. He's, always involved in the rucks and the lineouts, doing what he does. And also stands out just physically because he's a tall ginger guy with long hair. So always enjoy watching that fella play. And he's seeing him for Northland the last couple of years is also, although he didn't play for Northland last year because he was injured all season for the old whatever they call the NPC these days. But so Tom Robinson is a fella that always has stood out in recent years to me.
He's only, according to his Wikipedia, I would say it's correct as of 31st of October 2018, so I won't refer to his...
He needs to sort that out.
He's only played 12 games for Northland. I was like, shit, that's a pretty dramatic rise. I
think he had 2 seasons, I think.
Yeah, well, as correct as of 31 October 2018, so... I was tripping out, Wildcard. I was tripping out watching that because you had... Robinson with his ginger hair, you had Satudu with his blonde hair, you had Sam Nock with a blonde mullet, you had the little Finley Christie, another ginger halfback. Just to wrap up the Blues discussion here, you mentioned what's his face, Mr. Robinson, and other than TJ Faiani and his role in that midfield, because no matter, I think there's going to be a few, it's a niggly backline to try and figure out. They were playing with Rico Ani at centre. Obviously having Talea and Tianelu Talea and Caleb Clark on the wings was working out well, so that makes you think we should keep Rico Owani in the centres. You've got all sorts of different first 5'8". You got Oteri Black, Stephen Perofetto, who did spend time at fullback earlier in the season, Harry Plummer, Dan Carter, Bowden Barrett. So there's all these fullback centre type of players. So I can see a Blues backline that it may be tinkered with just to get, fine-tuned details, or they may just keep things settled. Regardless of what the plan is with the backline, what the plan is with Oteri Black and Perofetto and Bowden Barrett and all of that, TJ Faiani is going to be in the backline. TJ Faiani is going to be wearing the number 12 jersey. So at that stage, TJ Faiani is the focal point of the backline. Obviously, you're going to have more commanding players, but in terms of a consistency week to week, having Faiani playing in that midfield, it's just something to watch out for, given it looks like they have plenty of other options around Faiani, but just keeping Faiani there as someone to watch out for. And, so you mentioned Tom Robinson. When you're looking at building a rugby forward pack, you want what the Blues have. Dalton Papali'i, young, mobile, loose forward. who's the other guy? Blake Gibson, young, mobile, loose forward. Hoskins Satutu, big, powerful, mobile. Patrick Tuipulotu, big, powerful, mobile. Robinson works his ass off. And they all have skill. They've all got mobility. And I think this Blues team is going to be built around the, not the tight five, but the loose five, maybe the loose five, if that's a term as well, because their loose forward crew, along with the likes of Goodhue and Tuipulotu at lock, I think is going to be highly impactful for the Blues moving forward wildcard.
Yeah, who's this Dan Carter fella that you mentioned? Is he another one of them like local up and comers?
The most I can say about Dan Carter is a bargain. Like there was
Sure.
a lot of talk like from like the Dan Carter perspective about giving back and whether the Blues signing Dan Carter. Oh my God, that's epic. Having Dan Carter and Bowden Barrett, it's just a matter of financials and situation. Like Dan Carter, kudos to him because he's making very little money, I imagine, and he's fitting into whatever like salary cap situation they have to have. Not sure if Dan Carter's going to play a whole lot, like especially if you've got the younger first fives that they have. But when you're talking about like value for money and the role Dan Carter can have in the careers of some of those young first fives and the younger group that the Blues do have, value for money, it's fantastic signing. And it obviously suits. Like Dan Carter is kind of based in Auckland, I think. Lives here with his partner Anna Dillon, former hockey player. Dan Carter really kind of started the rugby hockey relationship situation. So yeah, I don't really know. Shout out Dan Carter doing his thing, and shout out to rugby.